The quantum observation network hummed softly in the background as senior analyst Du-Won leaned forward in his crystalline chair. His iridescent eyes reflected the soft blue glow from the massive holographic display that filled the center of the circular chamber. The image showed Earth, a small blue planet that had become the source of the biggest scientific controversy in the Galactic Logic Council's history. Du-Won's tendrils twitched nervously as he reviewed the data for the 100th time. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. But what they revealed seemed impossible. Beside him, Chief Observer Jai-Ho worked frantically at his console, his scaled fingers dancing across the controls as he ran diagnostic after diagnostic on their observation equipment. "Run the societal evolution calculations again," Du-Won ordered, his voice carrying the distinctive melodic tones of the council's upper echelons. The computers hummed in response, streams of data flowing through the air in glowing ribbons of light. Jai-Ho's scales rippled, shifting from their normal deep blue to a troubled purple. "Senior analyst, I've already run the calculations 17 times. The results remain consistent." He paused, his inner eyelids blinking rapidly in distress. "According to every established principle we have, this civilization shouldn't exist." Du-Won rose from his chair and walked closer to the hologram, his robes rustling softly against the polished floor. The image zoomed in automatically, showing cities, vehicles, and most troublingly, primitive spacecraft. "Look at them, Jai-Ho. They make decisions based on emotional responses rather than logical analysis. Their leaders are chosen through popularity contests rather than capability measurements. They wage wars over beliefs rather than resources. And yet," Jai-Ho added, his voice barely above a whisper, "they advance." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of machinery. Other analysts and observers stopped their work to watch the exchange between their two superior officers. The implications of what they were seeing reached far beyond mere scientific curiosity. "They've achieved spaceflight," Du-Won continued, gesturing at the hologram with one tendril. "They've split the atom, decoded their own genetic structure, and created artificial intelligence. But their methods," he trailed off, his crystalline eyes shifting through various spectrums of light as he processed the contradiction. Jai-Ho's scales shifted again, this time to a deep green of confusion. "Perhaps our instruments are malfunctioning. It would be more logical to assume equipment failure than to accept these readings as accurate." "No." Du-Won's response was immediate and firm. "The equipment is functioning perfectly. The humans represent something we've never encountered before, a logical impossibility that exists despite our certainty that it cannot." The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber like a wave. Junior analysts exchanged troubled glances, their own scales and tendrils betraying their discomfort with the concept. Their entire civilization was built on the foundation of pure logic and rational thought. The idea that a species could advance technologically while operating on emotional impulses challenged everything they believed about the nature of progress. "What do you recommend?" Jai-Ho asked, his voice carrying the weight of professional respect for his superior. Du-Won turned away from the hologram and faced the assembled observers. "We need more data. Direct observation. We must understand how they achieve progress despite their chaotic nature." He paused, his tendrils weaving complex patterns in the air as he thought. The council must be informed immediately. The next 6 hours were spent in intense debate within the council chamber. The most brilliant logical minds of their civilization gathered to analyze the problem from every angle. The walls of the chamber, usually a calm and peaceful white, shifted through various colors as the emotional suppression field struggled to maintain order in the face of such a fundamental challenge to their understanding of the universe. Finally, after exhausting every possible alternative explanation, the council reached a consensus. They would send their most accomplished analysts to study this aberration directly. The mission would be classified at the highest level, with only the council and select members of the observation network aware of its true purpose. As Du-Won left the chamber after the session, He paused to look one final time at the holographic image of Earth. The planet rotated slowly in the display, its oceans and continents clearly visible through its wispy atmosphere. Somewhere down there, billions of illogical beings were doing the impossible, advancing their civilization through chaos. Fascinating, he muttered to himself, his tendrils curling in anticipation of the discoveries to come. The humans had inadvertently presented the Council with the most intriguing logical problem they had faced in millennia. And Do-1 was determined to solve it, no matter how many fundamental principles of the universe he had to question in the process. But Jin carefully checked the seals on her environment suit one final time before stepping through the airlock. The gravity on Earth felt strange, not too different from standard galactic measurements, but somehow more unpredictable. Like everything else about this planet, even its basic physical properties seemed to defy proper categorization. The human research facility sprawled before her, a collection of buildings that appeared chaotic and unplanned to her logical mind. Yet somehow, they worked together efficiently. Like many things she had observed about humans in her first week on Earth, it shouldn't work, but it did. She made her way to the quantum physics laboratory, where she was scheduled to observe a human engineering team working on a particularly complex problem. As the Council's leading analyst of emerging civilizations, she had seen many species tackle scientific challenges, but none quite like this. The laboratory itself was a contradiction. Advanced equipment sat next to what appeared to be primitive decorative items, plants in containers, images of family members, and something called coffee mugs with illogical sayings printed on them. Jin's probability processors struggled to understand why anyone would clutter a workspace with non-functional items. The engineering team was already gathered around a holographic display when she entered. 5 humans, all focused intently on a complex quantum equation that floated in the air before them. Jin recognized the problem. It was one that had stumped some of the finest minds in the Galactic Logic Council for years. "Have you considered applying the standard Zix-Gamma calculation method?" she suggested, expecting them to acknowledge the obvious solution. Instead, the team leader, Dr. Chen, shook his head without even looking up. "Too rigid," he said, waving his hand through the hologram to rotate it. "We need something more flexible." Jin's neural pathways nearly short-circuited at this response. Flexible. Quantum mechanics doesn't allow for flexibility. The mathematics must be precise. One of the other engineers, a young woman named Kim, laughed. "That's where you're wrong. The math has to be precise, but how we get there, that's where the fun is." Fun. Another concept that made Jin's processors ache. She watched in growing confusion as the team seemed to ignore all standard problem-solving protocols. They made jokes, drew incorrect conclusions, followed clearly invalid paths of reasoning. And yet, somehow, they were making progress. "Wait," Kim suddenly said, pointing at a particular section of the equation. "What if we look at it backwards?" "Backwards?" Jin interjected. "That would invalidate the entire probability sequence." But the humans weren't listening. They were all staring at the equation with strange expressions on their faces, expressions that Jin's emotional recognition software identified as excitement and inspiration. What happened next defied all logical explanation. The team began manipulating the equation in ways that violated at least 7 fundamental principles of quantum mathematics. They called it thinking outside the box, another phrase that Jin added to her growing list of puzzling human concepts. Then, impossibly, it worked. The solution appeared in the hologram, elegant and perfect. Jin ran the calculations through her own processors 3 times, but there was no denying it. The humans had solved in hours what the Council had failed to solve in years. But how? She finally managed to ask. "How did you know this approach would work? Where are your probability analyses? Your validation sequences?" Dr. Chen turned to her with what her software identified as a smile, a facial expression humans use to convey multiple, often contradictory emotions. Sometimes you just feel it in your gut. He-Jin made a careful note about this mysterious organ called gut and its apparent computational capabilities. She had already documented 17 references to this biological component in various decision-making contexts. The council would need to study this phenomenon extensively. As she watched the team celebrate their success with a ritual involving the consumption of a bitter brown liquid, coffee, she learned, He-Jin realized she would need to completely revise her mission parameters. She had come to Earth expecting to document the inevitable collapse of a society that defied logical principles. Instead, she found herself questioning everything she had ever known about the nature of progress and innovation. Later that evening, in her sealed quarters, He-Jin prepared her daily report to the council. She stared at the blank screen for several minutes, her tendrils twitching with uncharacteristic uncertainty. How could she explain what she had witnessed in terms the council would understand? Finally, she began. Preliminary observations suggest that human technological advancement may not be occurring despite their illogical methods, but because of them. Further study is urgently recommended. Also, request immediate research initiative into biological component designated as gut and its apparent ability to process complex quantum calculations. She paused, then added, personal note. Consider possibility that our definition of logic may be incomplete. As she sent the report, He-Jin realized that for the first time in her extensive career as an analyst, she was experiencing what humans called excitement about an assignment. The implications were troubling, but somehow, in a very human way, that only made it more interesting. The emergency signal flashed through the galactic network like a red lightning bolt, setting off alarms in every major system. Tahi stood in the crisis management center, her crystalline form reflecting the countless warning lights that filled the massive room. Around her, dozens of logical processors worked at full capacity, trying to find a solution to what appeared to be an impossible problem. 3 stellar systems, each home to billions of sentient beings, faced imminent destruction. The chain of stellar anomalies had appeared without warning, defying all known physical laws. It was as if the universe itself had decided to break its own rules. Run the calculations again, Tahi ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The massive quantum computers hummed louder, their crystalline cores glowing bright enough to cast shadows on the walls. Analysis complete, the main computer announced. Probability of saving all 3 systems, 0%. The room fell silent. Tahi's assistants looked at her with their multicolored eyes, waiting for guidance. As the Logic Council's head of crisis management, she had handled countless emergencies, but never one where the mathematics offered absolutely no hope. What about saving 2 systems? She asked, her tendrils twisting with stress. Probability, 43.2%. The computer responded, but this would guarantee the destruction of the 3rd system. Before Tahi could respond, a new signal cut through the network. A human ship had arrived, carrying a delegation of their scientists. Led by physicist Su-min, they had responded to the emergency broadcast faster than any other civilization. The humans entered the crisis center without waiting for proper authorization. Su-min, a small female with short black hair and intense eyes, walked straight to the main display. She studied the swirling patterns of the stellar anomalies for exactly 2.3 seconds before speaking. "We can save them all," she said simply. Tahi's probability processors nearly crashed at this statement. "Impossible. We have run every possible calculation. There is no mathematical solution, Fat." "Show me the anomaly patterns again," Su-min interrupted, earning shocked gasps from Tahi's assistants. In their society, interrupting a superior was considered highly illogical and therefore forbidden. The display shifted, showing the 3 stellar systems and the web of quantum disturbances threatening to tear them apart. Su-min walked around the hologram, her eyes narrowing as she studied it from different angles. "What if," she said slowly, "we use the anomalies against each other?" Tahi's voice modulator crackled with disbelief. "The mathematics clearly show." Mathematics don't account for everything. Sumin interrupted again. Sometimes you have to think outside the box. She stepped forward and began manipulating the hologram with quick, confident movements. Look here, and here, and here. The anomalies are like waves. If we time it right, we can make them cancel each other out. That's... Tahi searched her vast database for the right word. Insane. The precision required would be beyond any known capability. One microscopic miscalculation, and all three systems would be destroyed instantly. Sumin smiled, an expression that Tahi's emotional recognition software classified as confident rather than the expected worried or defeated. That's why we won't use calculations. We'll use instinct. The crisis center erupted in chaos. Logical processors overloaded, causing several of Tahi's assistants to temporarily shut down. The main computer began producing error messages in 17 different languages. But Sumin wasn't finished. She pulled out a small device, primitive by galactic standards, and projected her own simulation. We position ships here, here, and here. When I give the signal, they fire graviton beams at precisely the right moment. The anomalies will fold in on themselves. And how will you determine this right moment without calculations? Tahi asked, her voice heavy with skepticism. The same way a surfer knows when to catch a wave. Sumin replied, we'll feel it. Tahi's probability processors nearly shut down completely. Feel it? Feel it? You propose to save billions of lives based on a feeling. Yes, Sumin said simply, because sometimes that's the only way. Logic can only take you so far. After that, you need something more. As Tahi watched the humans' simulation play out, she realized she faced an impossible choice. Follow the perfect, irrefutable logic that said nothing could be done, or trust in this completely illogical plan that defied every principle she had ever known. The emergency signal continued to pulse, reminding them that time was running out. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and for the first time in her long career, Tahi found herself considering the unthinkable, turning her back on pure logic and trusting in something she couldn't quantify or measure. The Council will never approve this, she said finally. Sumin's smile grew wider. Then it's a good thing we didn't ask them. My ships are already in position. We just need your help to coordinate the response teams. Tahi looked at the human, then at her probability processors showing the 0% chance of success, then back at the human again. She made her decision. Show me exactly where you need those ships. Jinwoo stood in the observation chamber, his crystalline form reflecting the chaos of activity around him. As the youngest member of the Logic Council in 300 cycles, he had faced considerable skepticism from his peers. Now, watching the humans work, he understood why the elders had chosen him for this unprecedented collaboration. The chamber buzzed with a mixture of human voices and alien technology. Holographic displays filled the air, showing the 3 endangered stellar systems from every possible angle. Narration, the human scientist assigned to work with him, moved through the data with a fluidity that defied logical analysis. Look here, she said, pointing to a particular pattern in the anomaly field. See how the quantum fluctuations create a rhythm. Jinwoo's probability processors hummed as they attempted to analyze her statement. Rhythm is a musical concept. It has no place in quantum mechanics. Narration smiled, an expression that still puzzled Jinwoo despite his extensive study of human facial movements. Everything has rhythm if you know how to look for it. The universe dances, Jinwoo. We just need to learn its steps. He watched as she manipulated the holographic display, her fingers moving in patterns that seemed random but somehow produced increasingly accurate results. Her team worked around her, each adding their own chaos to the mixture of calculations and intuition. Your species deliberately introduces chaos into your problem-solving, he observed, his voice modulator struggling to maintain its usual calm tone. According to every principle of logical analysis, this should result in immediate and catastrophic failure. Yet, he gestured at the display, where their latest simulation showed a 78% success rate, far higher than any purely logical approach had achieved. Mireille laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Life itself is chaos, Jinwoo. We just learned to swim in it instead of fighting against it. Jinwoo's processors nearly overloaded trying to understand this concept. But chaos is the enemy of progress. Without order, without logical structure, how can anything be achieved? Watch, Mireille said, pulling up a new simulation. When you try to impose perfect order on a chaotic system, what happens? The simulation showed the standard logic council approach to containing the stellar anomalies. The perfectly calculated response looked beautiful, precise, and failed completely. Now watch this, she continued, introducing what appeared to be random variables into the equation. The simulation shifted, became messier, less precise, and suddenly showed a viable solution. But that's impossible, Jinwoo protested, his crystalline form vibrating with confusion. You violated at least 12 fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. Did we? Mireille challenged, her eyes sparkling with what his emotional recognition software identified as amusement. Or did we just show you that those principles might not be as fundamental as you thought? Jinwoo found himself moving closer to the hologram, his logical mind struggling with concepts that shouldn't make sense, but somehow did. He watched as Mireille's team continued their work, mixing precise calculations with what they called hunches and gut feelings. How do you know which rules to break? He finally asked. Mireille considered this for a moment. We don't. Really. We just try things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But we learn from both. Learning from failure. Jinwoo's voice modulator crackled with surprise. But failure is unacceptable. It indicates a flaw in the logical process. Failure is just another type of data, Mireille explained, pulling up the results of their previous attempts. Look here. Every time we failed, we learned something new about how the anomalies behave. Each failure brought us closer to success. Jinwoo's processors worked overtime trying to integrate this concept. The idea that failure could be valuable, that chaos could be beneficial, that breaking rules could lead to better solutions. It challenged everything he had been programmed to believe. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The human's approach, illogical as it seemed, was producing results that pure logic could not achieve. As he watched Mireille and her team work, Jinwoo began to understand why the council had chosen him for this assignment. Unlike his older, more rigidly logical colleagues, his younger processors were still capable of adapting to new paradigms. Perhaps, he said slowly, his voice modulator carefully forming each word, logic itself needs to evolve. Mireille's smile grew wider. Now you're thinking like a human. For the first time in his existence, Jinwoo found himself doing something completely illogical. He smiled back. His crystalline form shifted colors in a way that would have shocked his council colleagues, but somehow felt right in this moment of understanding. As they turned back to their work, Jinwoo realized that he was no longer just observing the humans. He was learning from them. And perhaps, just perhaps, that had been the council's plan all along. So, he said, his voice carrying a new note of curiosity, teach me more about this twinning in chaos concept. The future of 3 stellar systems still hung in the balance, but Jinwoo felt something he had never experienced before. Hope based not on logical certainty, but on the wonderful unpredictability of human innovation. The massive fleet of ships hung in space like a web of artificial stars, each vessel precisely positioned according to the humans' seemingly chaotic plan. Yi Jin stood on the bridge of the command ship, her crystalline form reflecting the swirling colors of the stellar anomalies that threatened to tear apart 3 entire systems. Coordination report, she commanded, her voice steady despite the growing pressure in her probability processors. Fleet positioning at 78% completion. Her ship's eye responded. Warning. Probability of success remains below acceptable parameters. Recommended course of action. Immediate withdrawal to safe distance. Ye Jin ignored the warning, something she would have considered impossible just a few days ago. Instead, she focused on the holographic display showing the hundreds of ships moving into position. Most were crewed by humans, their vessels smaller and less advanced than the Council's ships, but moving with an assurance that defied logical explanation. How do they do it? She wondered aloud, watching a human ship navigate through a particularly dangerous section of the anomaly field. Their sensors are inferior to ours, their computers are primitive, yet they move as if they know exactly where they need to be. Human ships continue to disregard standard safety protocols, the AI noted. Their behavior patterns suggest a complete absence of proper risk assessment. On the communication channel, Ye Jin could hear the human crews chatting, their voices carrying an emotion her systems identified as excitement rather than the expected terror. They called out to each other, making jokes, offering encouragement, behaving in ways that should have led to immediate disaster. Team 3, we're picking up some weird readings from the anomaly. One human captain reported. Feels like it's trying to pull us in. Trust your gut, came the response from the fleet commander. If it feels wrong, adjust your position. Ye Jin's processors nearly stalled at this exchange. How could they base their actions on feelings when dealing with such complex gravitational forces? Yet she couldn't deny the results. The human ships were maintaining perfect formation despite the chaos around them. Final ships moving into position. The AI announced. Warning. Anomaly activity increasing. Cascade effect imminent. The plan itself seemed like pure madness to Ye Jin. The humans intended to use the gravitational forces of the anomalies against each other, creating a cascade effect that would theoretically stabilize all three systems. According to every calculation her processors could perform, it should be impossible. All ships report ready, came the call over the command channel. Awaiting your signal, Commander Ye Jin. She hesitated for a moment, her logical training screaming at her to abort the mission. The probability of success was so low it barely registered on her scales. If they failed, they would not only lose the three threatened systems, but potentially create an even larger catastrophe. Commander, her eye warned again. Probability of success is now at 0.23%. This course of action violates all known safety protocols. Yet the humans showed no sign of doubt. Their ships held position. Their crews remained calm, all of them seemingly untroubled by the astronomical odds against them. They called it trusting their instincts, a concept that had puzzled Ye Jin throughout the mission planning. But now, watching them work, seeing how they adapted to each new challenge with that strange mixture of calculation and intuition, she was beginning to understand. Some things truly did transcend pure logic. Begin countdown, she ordered, her voice carrying a new note of certainty. All ships prepare to initiate gravitational pulse on my mark. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. Ye Jin watched the holographic display, showing the complex web of gravitational forces they were about to manipulate. According to every logical principle she knew, what they were attempting should be impossible. 5 seconds, she announced. 4, 3. The anomalies swirled and pulsed, their deadly energy threatening to break free at any moment. The human ships held their positions, their crews ready to act with that impossible confidence that seemed to define their species. 2, 1. Mark. The fleet moved as one, each ship firing its gravitational pulse in perfect sequence. The energy beams cut through space, intersecting with the anomalies in a pattern that looked random but was anything but. Ye Jin watched in amazement as the chaos of energy began to shift, to change, to flow in new directions. Anomaly patterns shifting, the AI reported, its voice carrying what almost sounded like surprise. Cascade effect initiating. Warning. Unexpected resonance patterns detected. The space around them seemed to twist and bend as the gravitational forces collided and combined. For one terrifying moment, Ye Jin thought they had failed, that the logical predictions of disaster had been correct. Then, impossibly, beautifully, The chaos began to organize itself. The anomalies, pulled by the carefully orchestrated gravitational pulses, started to cancel each other out. System by system, the threat began to recede. "Status report," Yi Jin demanded, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. "Anomaly activity decreasing in all 3 systems," the AI responded. "Stability returning to normal parameters. Commander, it appears to be working." The human crews erupted in cheers, their voices filling the communication channels with joy and relief. Yi Jin stood silently, watching as the impossible became reality before her eyes. In that moment, she realized that her understanding of the universe had changed forever. Logic was not everything. Sometimes, the most illogical approach could lead to the most perfect solution. "Thank you," she said quietly to the human crews, though she knew they probably couldn't hear her over their celebrations. "You've taught us all something valuable today." The stars shone peacefully now, the anomalies reduced to harmless ripples in space. 3 systems saved, billions of lives preserved, all because of a plan that defied logic itself. Yi Jin made a note in her report to the council. "Some things cannot be measured by probability alone. The humans have shown us that there is wisdom in chaos, truth in instinct, and sometimes the most logical choice is to transcend logic itself." The Grand Council chamber gleamed with crystalline light as members filed in for the emergency session. Kyung-ho, the Grand Logician, stood at the center podium, his form shifting through various shades of blue as he processed the events that had led to this unprecedented meeting. The success of the human solution to the stellar crisis had done more than save 3 systems. It had shaken the very foundations of their civilization. The chamber, usually a place of perfect order and calm discussion, buzzed with an almost human-like energy of uncertainty and excitement. "Esteemed members of the council," Kyung-ho began, his voice resonating through the chamber, "we face a moment that defies all logical prediction. Our perfect system of thought, developed over millennia, has been proven incomplete." The assembled council members shifted uncomfortably in their crystalline seats. Many of their probability processors showed signs of strain as they attempted to integrate this new reality. "The humans," Kyung-ho continued, "have demonstrated something we long considered impossible. They have shown that chaos, when properly controlled, can be more effective than pure logic. Their solution to the stellar crisis violated 17 fundamental principles of our scientific understanding, and yet it worked." He gestured to the central hologram, which displayed recordings of the human fleet's impossible success. The images showed their ships moving in patterns that should have led to disaster, yet somehow resulted in perfect harmony. "Our fundamental understanding of problem-solving must be revised," he announced, his form now pulsing with determination. "The humans have demonstrated that our perfect logic is imperfect." The chamber erupted in a cascade of colors as council members reacted to this statement. Some shifted to deep purple in distress, others to bright green in curiosity. A few even displayed the rare orange of excitement, an emotion usually considered too chaotic for proper logical discourse. Senior Analyst 2-1 rose from his seat, his tendrils weaving complex patterns in the air. "Grand Logician, are you suggesting we abandon our logical principles?" "No," Kyung-ho replied, his voice calm but firm. "I am suggesting we expand them. The humans have shown us that there is logic in chaos, pattern in randomness. We must learn to understand this if we wish to continue advancing as a civilization." He activated another hologram, this one showing human children at play. "Look at how they learn, through experimentation, through failure, through what they call trial and error. Their methods seem random, yet they consistently produce results that our most advanced calculations cannot predict." The council watched in fascination as the children built structures with blocks, failing repeatedly, but learning from each attempt until they succeeded. It was a process that defied logical efficiency, yet somehow worked. "I propose," Kyung-ho announced, "the establishment of a new field of study, human intuitive logic. We will learn their methods, understand their chaos, and integrate their wisdom with our own." The proposal was so revolutionary that several council members had to temporarily shut down their probability processors to prevent overload. Yet none could deny the evidence before them. In the following weeks, the first classes in human intuitive logic began. The sight of logical beings deliberately introducing chaos into their calculations would have been unthinkable just months before. Now, under the guidance of human teachers, they learned to trust their gut. After first spending considerable time studying what a gut was and how it could possibly assist in computational processes, the results were both impressive and unsettling. Students who embraced the human methods began solving problems that had stumped their civilization for generations. They learned to see patterns in chaos, to find solutions in seeming randomness. But how do you know when to apply logic and when to use intuition? One student asked during a particularly challenging session. The human instructor smiled, an expression that no longer caused confusion among the logical beings. "That's the beauty of it," she replied. "You don't know. You have to feel it." The concept of feeling the solution rather than calculating it was perhaps the most difficult adjustment for the logical beings. Yet as they practiced, many found themselves developing what humans called instincts, the ability to sense a correct answer before their processors could confirm it. Kyung-ho watched all this with growing satisfaction. The integration of human chaos theory into their logical systems was revolutionizing more than just their problem-solving methods. It was changing their entire civilization. "We were wrong," he noted in his personal log, "to think that perfect logic was the highest form of intelligence. The humans have shown us that true wisdom lies in knowing when to embrace chaos, when to trust instinct, and when to let go of our need for absolute certainty." The concept of controlled chaos as a tool rather than a flaw continued to spread throughout their civilization. Art, once considered a purely decorative and therefore illogical pursuit, began to flourish. Music, with its emotional resonance, found new appreciation among beings who had previously valued only mathematical precision. And perhaps most surprisingly, they began to laugh, not the calculated response to humor they had previously employed, but genuine, spontaneous laughter that defied logical explanation yet felt undeniably right. The paradigm shift was complete. The perfect logic of their past had given way to something new, something better. A synthesis of order and chaos, of calculation and intuition, of logic and humanity. As Kyung-ho often remarked in the years that followed, it was the most logical development they could never have predicted. The gleaming halls of the Galactic Academy shimmered with an iridescent light as Minna made her way to the lecture hall. 2 cycles had passed since the Great Stellar Crisis, and the changes in galactic society were nothing short of revolutionary. She carried with her a small device that humans called a lucky charm, a completely illogical object that nevertheless gave her confidence. The lecture hall was filled with young aliens from across the galaxy, their crystalline forms shifting through various colors of anticipation. On the holoboard behind her, the equation that had changed everything glowed softly. Chaos plus logic equals innovation. "Greetings, students," Minna began, watching as their attention focused on her. "Today marks the beginning of your journey into what we now call human paradox logic. Some of you may have heard stories about the Great Crisis, about how human illogical methods saved 3 entire systems from destruction." She paused, noting the color shifts among her students, mostly shades of curiosity, with a few showing the purple of skepticism. That was good. Skepticism was part of the learning process. "But first," she continued, "let us address the classification that has puzzled so many. Humans are classified as advanced despite paradox. Can anyone tell me why?" A young student near the front raised their appendage, their form glowing with confident blue light. "Because they achieve technological advancement while operating on emotional rather than logical principles." "Partially correct," Minna responded, moving to the holoboard. "But the paradox goes deeper than that. Humans don't advance despite their emotions. They advance because of them. Their chaos isn't a hindrance to innovation. It's the source of it. She brought up a holographic display showing human children playing with building blocks. Watch this carefully. See how they try different combinations, fail repeatedly, yet keep going. This is what we now call creative iteration, a process that seems inefficient but produces results that pure logic could never achieve. Another student raised their appendage, their form flickering with confusion. But how can we learn to think illogically? It seems, well, illogical. Minna smiled, a gesture she had adopted from her human teachers, and one that her students were learning to interpret. That, young ones, is precisely the kind of paradox humans excel at solving. And today, you will begin to learn their methods. She activated another hologram, this one showing the famous fleet formation that had saved the three systems. Look at this pattern. By all logical calculations, it should have failed, yet it succeeded because humans understood something we had forgotten, that the universe itself isn't perfectly logical. The students watched in fascination as she walked them through the events of that historic day. She showed them how the human ships had moved in patterns that defied computational prediction, but somehow achieved perfect harmony with the chaos of the stellar anomalies. This is why human paradox logic is now considered essential knowledge for all advanced problem-solving. Minna explained, "It teaches us to see beyond our traditional limitations, to find solutions in places where logic says they cannot exist." She moved to the center of the room, her own crystalline form now glowing with the orange of excitement, an emotion that would have been suppressed in the old educational system. Today, you will begin with a simple exercise. I want each of you to try something that your probability processors say is impossible. The students shifted uncomfortably, their colors showing mixture of uncertainty and intrigue. One brave soul near the back raised their appendage. "But won't we fail?" "Almost certainly," Minna replied cheerfully, causing several students to flicker in surprise at her positive tone. And that's exactly the point. Humans have a saying, "Failure is the best teacher." Today, you'll learn why. As she watched her students begin their first attempts at controlled chaos, Minna reflected on how far their civilization had come. The integration of human intuition with logical processing had opened doors they never knew existed. Art, music, and creativity now flourished alongside scientific advancement. "Remember," she told her class as they worked, "the goal isn't to abandon logic, but to transcend it. To understand that sometimes the most logical choice is to be illogical." A student accidentally created a small quantum fluctuation while attempting their exercise, causing momentary panic among their classmates. Minna smiled again, remembering her own first attempts at human-style problem-solving. "Perfect," she said, surprising the student. "You've just demonstrated another human principle. Unexpected results often lead to the greatest discoveries." As the class continued, Minna knew that these young minds would go on to solve problems that pure logic could never address. They would learn to dance with chaos, to find patterns in randomness, and to trust their developing instincts alongside their probability processors. The new theorem had indeed changed everything. And somehow, that was exactly as it should be.